The Nepo baby CEO fired me for insubordination when I refused to cut corners, not realizing I was the designated responsible person on the federal explosives license. My name is Hank Miller. I'm 50 years old, and I spent 22 years keeping Cascade Mountain mining from blowing itself off the map. Literally. Most people don't think about what it takes to move a mountain. They see the trucks, the dust clouds, the massive pits carved into the earth. What they don't see is the paperwork, the federal licensing, the inspections, the careful, methodical process that separates a legitimate mining operation from a smoking crater. I enlisted in the Navy at 19, spent 8 years learning that cutting corners gets people killed, ordnance handling, explosive safety protocols, the kind of training where a mistake doesn't get you written up, it gets you buried. When I got out, I took that discipline to the private sector, started at Cascade as a safety coordinator, worked my way up through compliance, through operations, through every certification the ATF and MSHA could throw at me. By the time I turned 40, I was director of compliance, the person who signed off on every blast, every permit, every gram of A-info that went into the ground. Here's something most people outside the industry don't understand. When you're dealing with commercial explosives, the federal government doesn't care about your org chart. They don't care who owns the company or who sits in the corner office. They care about one thing, the responsible person. That's a legal designation. It means exactly what it sounds like. One individual named on the federal explosives license who bears personal accountability for every stick of dynamite, every blasting cap, every detonation cord on the premises. The license doesn't belong to the company. It belongs to that person. And for Cascade Mountain Mining, that person was me. I didn't ask for the designation. Old man Whitfield, the founder, asked me to take it 15 years ago. Sat me down in his office with the wood paneling and the smell of cigar smoke and explained it plain. Hank, I need someone the feds trust. Someone who won't bend. Someone who'll tell me no if I'm being stupid. He slid a silver pen across the desk. That's you. I signed the papers that afternoon. The thing about being the responsible person is that it's not a title you can delegate. It's not a role you can hand off to an assistant when things get inconvenient. If something goes wrong, a misplaced charge, an unauthorized detonation, a single cap that walks off the site, the ATF doesn't call the CEO. They call me. And if I can't answer, they don't wait for explanations. For 15 years, I made sure they never had to call. I missed my son's high school graduation for a surprise ATF audit. Worked through my wife's cancer treatments because we had a permit renewal that couldn't wait. When she passed, I took 3 days off. 3 days. Then I was back in the field, checking magazines, verifying chain of custody, making sure every I was dotted. The old man understood. He'd lost his wife young too. He knew what the work cost. His son didn't. Bradley Whitfield showed up 6 months ago with a Stanford MBA and a mandate to modernize operations. 32 years old. Designer haircut. The kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. First board meeting, he walked in 20 minutes late, set his MacBook on the table, and didn't look up for the first hour. When he finally spoke, it was to announce his aggressive growth initiative. We're leaving money in the ground, he said. Literally. Our blast schedules are too conservative. Our permitting timelines are bloated. We need to optimize. He said optimize like it was a magic word, like you could just optimize your way through federal explosives regulations. I raised my hand. Bradley, the blast schedules are set by the permits. The permits are set by the ATF based on geological surveys and safety assessments. We can't just speed them up because we want to. He looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I understand there are legacy processes, he said, but that's exactly what I'm here to address. Fresh perspectives, new approaches. We need people who see opportunities, not obstacles. I'd been called a lot of things in 22 years. Legacy process was a new one. Over the next few months, Bradley pushed. He wanted to double our blast frequency, wanted to skip the mandatory 48-hour inspection windows, wanted to bring in a new explosives vendor who could deliver faster, but wasn't on our approved list. Every time, I said no. Every time, he acted like I was being deliberately difficult, like safety protocols were just bureaucratic theater designed to slow down progress. If you've ever had a boss who thinks experience is just another word for stuck in the past, hit that like button and subscribe. Last Tuesday, Bradley called me into his office at 4:15 p.m. The timing was deliberate, late enough that most of the executive floor had cleared out. Early enough to pretend it was still business hours. He had a woman from HR standing behind him. She was holding a tablet like it was a shield, not making eye contact. I'd seen that posture before, watched it from the other side of the desk. Never expected to be on this end. Hank, sit down. Bradley gestured at the chair across from his desk. He didn't stand, didn't offer his hand. We need to discuss your future with Cascade. All right? Your resistance to the growth initiative has become a liability. You've repeatedly blocked operational decisions. You've undermined my authority with the board. And frankly, your attitude has been insubordinate. I sat there. Let him finish. Effective immediately, your position as Director of Compliance is terminated. Emily here will walk you through the severance package. He finally looked up from his laptop, smiled like he'd just won something. I want to be clear. This isn't personal. The company just needs people who are aligned with our vision. People who can adapt. You're welcome to stay in the industry, Hank. But Cascade is moving forward without you. He slid a manila folder across the desk. Termination paperwork. A severance offer. A standard NDA. The HR woman shifted her weight, waiting for the explosion, the arguments, the pleading. I understand, I said. Bradley blinked. You understand? I do. You want me gone. That's your call. I stood up, didn't touch the folder. I'll have my personal effects cleared out by end of business. He paused, recalibrating. He'd prepared for resistance, planned his counter-arguments. My compliance threw him off. That's very professional of you, Hank. I try. I walked out of his office, past the frosted glass, past the executive assistant who wouldn't meet my eye, past the elevator bank where I'd stood 1,000 times heading down to the operations floor. 22 years, ended with a manila folder and a smile. I took the elevator to the parking garage, sat in my truck. Rain was hitting the windshield pretty hard. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text from Rick Larson, my buddy from the Navy, who'd gone into regulatory law. Heard a rumor. Call me. I didn't call. Not yet. I sat there in the parking garage for 47 minutes, watching the rain streak down the glass, thinking about what Bradley didn't know, what his Stanford MBA hadn't taught him, what nobody in that boardroom seemed to understand. The federal explosives license wasn't attached to Cascade Mountain Mining. It was attached to me. And in exactly 72 hours, when the ATF processed my employment termination notification, they were going to have some very pointed questions for Bradley Whitfield about who, exactly, was now responsible for the 14 tons of commercial explosives sitting in Cascade's magazines. I started the truck. I had some calls to make. If you've ever been told you're not a team player for following the law, hit that like button and subscribe. The first call I made was to Rick Larson. Heard you got the boot, he said. No pleasantries. That's what I liked about Rick. 8 years on a destroyer together taught you that small talk wastes time. News travels fast. A TF field office in Denver is 3 guys I went to law school with. One of them mentioned Cascade's responsible person just got terminated. Asked me if I knew anything about it. Rick paused. You filed the notification yet? Submitting it tonight. Good. Do it by the book. Certified mail to the regional office. Electronic copy to the national database. Timestamp everything. I know the process, Rick. I know you do. I'm just making sure you don't give them any room to claim you didn't follow protocol. Another pause. You know what happens when a responsible person leaves and there's no qualified replacement on file? I do. Just making sure. Because Bradley Whitfield sure as hell doesn't. I hung up. Drove home. Fed Rex, my yellow lab. Poured myself 3 fingers of the good bourbon, not the daily stuff. Sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and spent the next 2 hours doing exactly what Rick said. I filed the Form 5400.14 Notification of Change in Responsible Person Status. Submitted electronic copies to the ATF's Federal Explosives Licensing Center in Martinsburg. Sent certified return receipt copies to the Denver field office. Time-stamped 9:47 p.m. Tuesday. Then I waited. Wednesday morning, I woke up at 6:15, made black coffee, took Rex for a walk, checked my phone. Nothing from Cascade. Of course not. They didn't know yet. The ATF doesn't send courtesy notifications to companies when their explosives license is about to become invalid. They assume the company knows. They assume the company has a succession plan. They assume someone in that gleaming corporate headquarters understands that federal explosives regulations aren't suggestions. Bradley Whitfield assumed a lot of things too. By Wednesday afternoon, I'd cleaned out my garage, organized my files, made a list of every certification, every permit, every inspection I'd personally conducted in the last 5 years. Documentation. The Navy taught me that. If you can't prove it happened, it didn't happen. Thursday morning, 8:47 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number with a Denver area code. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from a woman named Patricia Simmons, ATF Industry Operations Inspector. She sounded professional, calm, the kind of calm that comes before the storm. Mr. Miller, this is Patricia Simmons with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, Denver Field Division. We've received your notification of employment termination and need to conduct a compliance verification at Cascade Mountain Mining's primary facility. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I called her back at 9:15. Mr. Miller, thank you for returning my call so promptly. I need to verify some information. You were the sole responsible person designated on Cascade Mountain Mining's Federal Explosives License Type 21. That's correct. And you were terminated from your position on Tuesday, April 15th, at approximately 4:15 p.m. That's correct. Is there a designated successor on file with Cascade's license application? No, ma'am. There is not. Silence on the line, the kind of silence that means someone is taking very careful notes. Mr. Miller, are you aware of any other personnel at Cascade Mountain Mining who hold the required qualifications to serve as responsible person under 27 CFR 555.45? I am not aware of any such personnel. I see. More notes. Mr. Miller, we'll be conducting an on-site inspection at Cascade's primary facility tomorrow morning. Given your familiarity with the operation, would you be available to assist in verifying inventory and chain of custody records? I would be happy to assist the ATF in any way I can, Inspector Simmons. Thank you. I'll be in touch with the details. She hung up. I poured another cup of coffee. Looked out my kitchen window at the mountains in the distance. Somewhere out there, Bradley Whitfield was probably in a meeting talking about optimization, probably congratulating himself on removing the obstacle to his aggressive growth initiative. Probably had no idea that the ATF was about to land on his operation like a ton of bricks. Friday morning, 6 a.m. I was standing in my kitchen when my phone started buzzing. First call, Cascade main switchboard. I let it ring. Second call, Bradley Whitfield's direct line, voicemail. Third call, Jim Parsons, the operations manager. Good man. Been at Cascade almost as long as me. I answered that one. Hank, what the hell is happening? Good morning, Jim. There are federal agents at the main gate, ATF. They've got a court order. They're saying something about the explosives license being invalid. Nobody here knows what to do. Bradley's losing his mind. Sounds like a compliance issue. Hank, please, I've got 340 people on shift. We've got a blast scheduled for noon. They're saying we can't detonate. They're saying we can't even access the magazines. That's correct, Jim. Without a valid responsible person on the license, Cascade is not authorized to possess, store, or use commercial explosives. The ATF has authority to secure the facility until the situation is resolved. Hank, I'm sorry, Jim. I truly am, but I didn't make this decision. Bradley did. I hung up. The calls kept coming. Cascade's legal department, the HR woman who'd stood behind Bradley on Tuesday, a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be Old Man Whitfield calling from a golf course in Arizona. I answered that one. Hank. The old man's voice was rough, tired. What the hell is my son doing? He's learning a lesson, sir. The ATF just seized our entire explosives inventory. They've got court orders. They're talking about criminal referrals for operating without a valid license. That's what happens when you terminate your responsible person without a succession plan. Long pause. I could hear wind, birds. Wherever he was, it was nicer than a mining site. Did you try to tell him? Many times, sir. And he didn't listen. He said I was a legacy process, that the company needed people who could adapt. Another long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter. I gave you that pen for a reason, Hank. I knew you'd never bend. I knew you'd protect the company even from itself. He sighed. I didn't expect you'd need to protect it from my own son. Neither did I, sir. What do we do now? That's not my decision to make. I don't work for Cascade anymore. I hung up. Saturday morning, the news hit. Local paper first, then the industry publications, then a brief mention on the regional news. Cascade Mountain Mining, the region's largest employer, had been forced to halt all operations due to regulatory compliance issues. 340 workers sent home. Contracts in jeopardy. Stock price dropping. I took Rex for a long walk, made breakfast, sat on my back deck, and watched the sun come up over the mountains. My phone rang at 7:15 a.m. Bradley Whitfield. I looked at the screen for a long moment. Then I set the phone face down on the table. Watched the sun climb higher. Let it ring. The phone rang 11 more times that Saturday. I didn't answer. Sunday morning, a black sedan pulled into my driveway at 8:30 a.m. Rex lifted his head from his spot on the porch, watched it for a moment, then settled back down. Good judge of character, that dog. He knew whoever was in that car wasn't a threat. Bradley Whitfield stepped out. He looked different than he had on Tuesday. The designer haircut was still perfect, but his face had aged a decade. Dark circles under his eyes, the kind of pallor that comes from 72 hours of panic. He walked up to my porch, stopped at the bottom of the steps. Hank. Bradley. Can we talk? I didn't invite him up, didn't offer him a seat. Just sat there in my old wooden chair with my coffee getting cold, Rex at my feet. We're talking now. He swallowed. The confidence was gone. The Stanford swagger. The buzzwords. The casual arrogance. All of it stripped away by 3 days of federal agents and court orders. I need you to come back. I understand. The ATF says we can't touch anything. We can't operate. We can't even access our own equipment. They've got agents stationed at the magazines 24 hours a day. His voice cracked slightly. We've got contracts, deadlines. The Harrison County project alone is worth $47 million. If we can't deliver on schedule, they'll sue. The whole company could go under. That's quite a situation. Hank, please, I'm asking you. I made a mistake. I didn't understand. I didn't know. You didn't ask. He stopped, blinked. What? You didn't ask. I took a sip of my cold coffee, set the mug down. You walked into a 60-year-old company with a business degree and decided you knew better than everyone who'd been doing the work for decades. You called me insubordinate for following federal law. You called safety protocols obstacles. You never once asked why things were done the way they were done. Bradley opened his mouth, closed it. Your father built this company with his hands. He understood that mining isn't a spreadsheet exercise. It's men and machines and explosives and rock. One mistake, one shortcut, one moment of arrogance, and people die. That's why he asked me to be the responsible person. Not because of my resume, because he knew I would never bend. Not for him, not for the board, not for anyone. I stood up. Rex stood with me. You want me to come back? Fine. But here's how this works. Bradley's eyes widened. Hope flickered across his face. First, you resign as CEO, effective immediately. You can stay on the board if your father wants, but you don't make operational decisions. Not about timelines, not about safety, not about anything that touches federal compliance. Hank, I can't just... Second, my salary triples. I was making $180,000. Now I make $540,000, plus a 3% equity stake in the company, vested immediately, non-dilutable. His jaw dropped. That's... Third, I report directly to the board, not to you, not to whoever replaces you. The Director of Compliance answers to no one except the Board of Directors and the federal government. This is extortion. No, Bradley, this is the market. I stepped down off the porch, stood face to face with him. He was taller than me by 3 inches, but somehow he seemed smaller. You fired the only person in your organization qualified to hold a federal explosives license. You have no backup, no succession plan, no one else with the certifications, the training, or the trust of the ATF to take over. The 14 tons of ANFO in your magazines are currently federal evidence. Your contracts are in breach. Your stock is in freefall. And the ATF is reviewing whether to pursue criminal charges against you personally for operating an unlicensed explosives facility, even for the 72 hours between my termination and their seizure. I let that sink in. I'm not extorting you. I'm telling you what my expertise is worth, what my 22 years of perfect compliance are worth, what my signature is worth. I smiled, just slightly. You wanted to optimize? This is optimized. You get your company back. I get what I should have been earning all along. Safety isn't negotiable. Neither is my new salary. Bradley stood there for a long moment. The morning sun was climbing over the mountains behind me. Somewhere in the distance, a bird was singing. I need to call my father. I expect you do. He walked back to his sedan, sat inside for 23 minutes. I could see him through the windshield, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing. I went inside, made fresh coffee, came back out. Bradley got out of the car, walked back to the porch. The board meets tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., emergency session. He couldn't quite meet my eye. My father wants you there. He said you were right, about everything. I usually am, about safety. Will you come? I'll be there. He nodded, turned, stopped. Hank? Yes? I'm sorry. For what I said? About legacy processes? About obstacles? He finally looked at me. I didn't understand what I didn't understand. Most people don't, until it costs them something. He got in his car, drove away. I sat back down on my porch. Rex put his head on my knee. Good boy, I said. Monday morning, 9 a.m., Cascade Mountain, mining headquarters. The boardroom on the 14th floor. Mahogany table, 22 feet long. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. 8 board members. Old Man Whitfield at the head of the table, still wearing his golf clothes from the flight back. Bradley in a chair against the wall. Not at the table. I walked in at 8:58. Took the empty seat at the old man's right hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Whitfield said, "let's cut the bullshit. We're here because my son fired the only person keeping this company legal, and now we're facing federal seizure, contract breach, and potential criminal referral. Hank Miller has agreed to return under certain conditions. Those conditions are in front of you." Papers rustled around the table. I watched their faces as they read. Some balked at the salary. Some raised eyebrows at the equity stake, but they all kept reading, because they all knew the alternative. "This is highly irregular," said Margaret Dawson, the CFO, 68 years old, sharp as a razor. "So is having the ATF seize your entire operation," I said. She almost smiled. "Do we have any other options?" asked Tom Wilson, head of the Compensation Committee. "You can try to find another qualified responsible person," I said. "Someone with 20-plus years of explosives handling experience, current ATF certification, MSHA approval, and a track record clean enough that the Denver field office will trust them after this debacle. You've got maybe 2 weeks before your contracts start triggering penalty clauses. Maybe 3 before the criminal referral goes to the U.S. Attorney." Silence. "All in favor of accepting Mr. Miller's terms," Whitfield said. 8 hands went up. 8-0. Motion carries. The old man looked at his son against the wall. "Bradley, the board accepts your resignation as CEO, effective immediately. You'll retain your seat on the board, non-voting, until further notice." Bradley nodded. Didn't speak. Whitfield turned to me, reached into his pocket, pulled out the same silver pen he'd given me 15 years ago. "I believe this belongs to you." I took it, signed the papers. 3 weeks later, the ATF released the seized inventory. Operations resumed. The Harrison County project delivered on schedule. The stock recovered. Bradley Whitfield enrolled in a mining safety certification program. I heard he's actually doing the work, learning what the job really means. His father told me the humiliation did him good, made him curious instead of arrogant. Maybe. We'll see. Friday evening, 3 months after I signed those papers, I sat on my back deck watching the sunset. Rex was at my feet. My son Michael was next to me, home from college for the weekend, working through a plate of steaks I'd grilled. "Dad," he said, "did you really hold an entire mining company hostage with a federal form?" "I didn't hold anyone hostage. I followed protocol." "Right," he grinned. "Protocol." I sipped my bourbon. The good stuff now, not the daily drinker. I'd earned it. "Michael, let me tell you something. Most people think power comes from titles, from offices, from being the loudest person in the room. It doesn't. Power comes from being the person who knows what they're doing, the person who can't be replaced, the person who, when they walk out the door, takes something essential with them. Like a federal explosives license? Like expertise? Like integrity? Like 22 years of doing the job right. I watched the sun sink below the mountains. Anyone can hire a guy with a fancy degree, but you can't buy competence. You can't fake trust. And you sure as hell can't optimize your way past the ATF. Michael laughed. Rex lifted his head, looked at us both, and settled back down. I thought about Bradley Whitfield, sitting in a classroom somewhere, learning the names of detonation compounds. I thought about his father, who understood what it meant to build something with your hands. I thought about 22 years of missed graduations and working through grief and doing the job right, even when no one was watching. Sometimes value doesn't announce itself. It just does the work, day after day, until the day it walks out the door. And then everyone notices. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.